Hi, and welcome to Foreign Comics Calling, the podcast for all things foreign comics related. I'm Ken, and on behalf of my co-hosts Eric, Matt, and Stephen, we'd like to welcome you to another scintillating episode.
Awesome. Scintillating.
Sweet.
Wow, that's setting,
I like that word.
That's setting the bar high. That's
And let me tell you that on every episode, I may change that word.
Sizzling.
Nice.
I like it.
Sizzling. So we, when we last spoke, we had a bit of a cliffhanger question that I posed to you guys, and I think I might end this one with another cliffhanger. So buckle up for that. But before we jump into that, the one thing I would just kind of housekeeping, I saw on the Foreign Comics Calling podcast page on Facebook and in the group, I saw a couple really great posts that I wanted to make mention of, and I think you guys are familiar. So it's N. Scott Robinson, and there were two things that he posted that I thought were just tremendous. One was a video from the San Diego Comic-Con where he did a panel. Have you guys seen that?
Yes, the Filipino panel.
Yeah, that was really great.
Yeah, awesome.
He gets into like the localization, of the characters and stuff like that, which, I couldn't do justice on a thumbnail sketch, but that's a dude maybe we should consider getting on the show at some point to talk about that, because I thought that was
for sure,
absolutely interesting.
Yep,
and then
for sure.
And that guy also did an incredible, monumental bit of due diligence in assembling websites and URLs and a guide for, international locations, directories, websites, auction sites, sales sites to find comics all around the world. Right? That was, I haven't seen anything that comprehensive. That's
amazing. I mean, I was reading down the list. I thought Scott's done one heck of a job doing this. Yeah, that didn't take 5 minutes. That took some time.
Yeah.
So, hats off to Scott.
Heck yeah.
Brilliant.
Heck
cool.
yeah.
Very cool.
And I tell people all the time when and the thing that beginners should know, they should go through that list, and every single URL needs to be saved in a bookmark folder, and call it something like hunting or sources or something, because that information is key. Being able to know where to source these books, the auction sites, even if you don't have a way to get in, just knowing that they exist is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've kind of lost count of how many posts I've seen this particular week where people are saying, how do I get this? How do I source this? Where do I go to? Can someone help me? Well, there you go. There it is. Do exactly what Matt just said, and make that folder, bookmark those bookmarks, those URLs.
Yeah, right on.
Yep.
So that actually is a good lead into what our cliffhanger question was, which was, what's the biggest mistake a new collector might make? So you guys have had, a week or so to stew on that, and probably a lifetime heretofore. So what's the, I love to use the word heretofore. So what's the biggest mistake that a new collector might make? Let's start with Steven. What do you think?
I think primarily you have to understand that when it comes to American comics, you can pretty much go on your own. You can travel around to shows, you can go to stores, you can do whatever you got, you can browse, and you can find what you're looking for pretty readily. So you don't have to have a lot of connections or know a lot of people, because it's there. It's there. You can travel around and find it on your own. But I think the biggest mistake that people, when they get into foreign comics, make is thinking you can do the same with foreign comics, because you can't. You're gonna have to make connections. You're gonna have to get a hold of people. You're gonna have to find connections, find people who are in it, make those connections, even if it's overseas with people in those countries or the people around here who have those connections, and make those connections, because you're gonna have a hard time finding a lot of the stuff you're looking for if you don't. Just like we mentioned here about all the different areas and platforms and links and stuff to get to these places where these books are at. You've got to do the research. You've got to contact the people. You've got to get to those links. You may even need to start examining a little bit of the language, because there's a huge language barrier in a lot of these cases. And you may have to start actually even studying a little bit of the language, trying to get a little bit more knowledgeable with at least basics of how to greet and talk with people. It's a whole different thing than American comics. I go to a lot of shows, And so I get to browse a lot, and I'll find some foreign stuff that shows. But if you really want to dig deep, I think the biggest mistake people are going to make is if you really want to dig deep into the foreign market and find some of these tougher, harder to find books, you're not going to be able to go alone. You're going to have to make those connections. Part of that is going to be learning at least a little bit of some of the languages. And part of that is just getting a hold of people and say, hey, who can I talk to? Where can I go? What can I do to try to get a hold of these people to see about finding the books I want to find?
Yeah. Let me just to follow up on that before I go to Matt and Ken on that question. Just you don't have to dig in deep because I'm sure it's a case by case thing, but in general, do you find foreigns at shows are priced higher because they're, for whatever reason?
I would say that they're probably relatively the same as what you might find on eBay.
Okay.
Give or take, which of course, anything on eBay and anything at shows is typically going to be priced a little bit higher because those people have overhead to deal with. They've had all these costs in order to be at the shows and everything, so they're trying to recoup some of that. But typically, you can talk them down some. I've had it where I find a book and I'm like, Jesus, they want $40 for this. This is probably only worth like $20-$25. So I was like, hey, will you take 25 for this or 20 for this? And most of the time you can talk them down with that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd say the show prices are probably typical of eBay.
Okay. Yeah, minus shipping, right? So if you think of it that
way,
minus
shipping, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
So back to that original question, biggest mistake a new collector might make. What are your thoughts on that, Matt? What do you think?
Well, I'd like to just say for sure with what Steven said. I'd like to reiterate, he totally dead on, verdad, which means truth in Spanish. It's exactly right. So he's right on that for sure. Sticking to American eBay, you ain't going to build a set doing that.
No.
It's going to be very difficult. But there is another one. So with that said, Stephen is dead on correct on that. The other mistake, though, that I think newbies into this niche make is they go into it with their extremely anal view of condition.
Yeah.
Now, I call it anality. We Americans have this anal condition. We're just, our asses are so tight you can make diamonds if you shove some charcoal in your mouth.
Squeeze hard enough.
And the honest to God truth is, if you are a conditioned snob, you are not going to have a foreign collection. You might have a few pieces, but you're not going to be a foreign collector because you've got to check your condition obsessiveness at the door with this niche. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the biggest mistakes, because I have seen people make the mistake and go, I like that book, I love that book, but it's just too rough for me. I'm going to wait until a nicer one comes around. And guess what? A nicer one never comes around. So that would be my say right there.
Yeah.
If you are a condition obsessive, get out of this niche, go away. You're not going to be able to play and swim in this part of the pool, because you're just always going to be so obsessed, and you're never going to find. You're going to let so many books pass through your fingers that you should have bought for your collection because of condition. Yeah, I'm sorry, buddy, but
absolutely agree with that, Matt.
Which kind of feeds into that whole idea that we've been promoting here of buy it when you see it.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny too. That goes back to that first episode when we all kind of talked about that thing that inspired us into this subculture was, I think it was Matt. You said you're a slave to a number on a slab, right? Like you're obsessed with the grade, right? Like you almost have to be liberated from that in order. You know what I mean? In order to actually enjoy it.
And I will say that for me personally, that Tim helped me with that, because I was a big grade junkie. And when I first got into the comic markets, Tim basically pounded it into my head. Don't worry about the condition. Don't worry about the grade. Get it when you like it, when you see it, because it doesn't matter what the grade is. You can find a better one down the line, or you may not ever even see one. But if you don't get it when you see it, you're going to regret it, because condition doesn't matter as much.
True.
Sounds like Tim.
Yeah. He pounded that into me, and so I've very much gotten into that. So.
I pretty much guarantee that when that if you're a new person listening to this podcast right now and you're just getting into foreign comics, that bit of information alone is worth a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you're going to start to enjoy comics again. You know?
Yeah,
You
Agree.
Yeah.
Cool. So
We're liberated.
I do want to point out that we're just a couple minutes in, and Tim already got a shout out again.
Yeah.
So we need to get him on the show. Ken, anything to add to that about the biggest mistake of what a new collector might make?
Well, it's a two-pronged answer I've got to give you, I think. First thing is, if you find the book, check that there aren't any more out there and compare and contrast. And if you put your mind on that one book that you do want, get the seller to send you some pictures, close-ups of the staples, which is what I was trying to tie into the other week. Because you've got to think of, how can I put this? If you are buying a book from a country with a lot of humidity, a lot of moisture in the air, and you see the pictures of the book that you want to buy, look at those staples. And if they're shiny, bright silver, something's been done to that book. More than likely.
Yeah.
More than likely. What you're looking for in like an overly hot, wet country, like Brazil, are rusty staples. If you're looking to buy from the UK, still look for those rusty staples because it's cold and wet. It's still very wet. So, yeah, compare and contrast. Check to see if there's any more of those, of that particular book on the market. And if there isn't, there's just that one book, well, buy it. But you might want to just ask the seller to send you a picture of the staples close up.
Right.
Just to make sure that you're not getting what some sellers call facsimiles, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
So it's a facsimile. So that merges together some interesting things where we're talking about conditions not necessarily being, the primary focus, rather the scarcity in terms of collecting some of these things. But you're talking about facsimiles versus a restoration, right? So if it's a restoration,
Indeed.
you would absolutely still want it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm just going to pop in again. There's another option on that thing. If you see a book and there's no staples, that can be perfectly okay, because a lot of comic collectors are buyers in that country. They're quite aware what humidity does to metal, so they'll actually take the staples out and sell the book with no staples. So if it's got shiny staples, that's a big no-no, really, in hot countries or wet countries. If it's got rusty staples, that's great. If it's got no staples, that's a very thoughtful seller generally.
Okay. And you're talking,
and oftentimes they.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You're talking primarily older books, Golden Age, Silver Age, right? The more modern ones. Yeah.
Mostly, yeah. Mostly.
It can still feed into the Bronze and Copper Age though, just because of the climate. Yeah, it can. But yeah, Ken's right on that. I mean, in some situations, we even think that maybe staples were removed like way back when, like in the 60s or 70s, because the collectors that knew that they didn't have bag and boards, so they knew that by removing the staples initially, they were going to preserve their page quality, because what happens is those staples then migrate that rust. And so, you see that often with some Golden Age foreigns where the staples are just gone. And it's been, in some instances, they'll even be glued. So they almost take the staples out and they'll apply some glue to try to keep it together. We've seen that before. And just to piggyback off Ken, if it looks too good to be true, it probably isn't true. And one of the things that the new guys could do, I'm sure they could ask any one of us, hey, does this look too good to be true? And in those instances, we'll say, that's probably not accurate.
Interesting. Wow, yeah. So you almost want the weathered book, right? Like we were talking about date stamps.
Absolutely.
Date stamps are, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
In some instances, yeah. I mean, if you're buying, or in the most ideal circumstances, with some of these really difficult nations like Brazil, like the Philippines, discoloration is okay, because at least it's not a brand new staple, and somehow, some miracle, that book made it without massive rusting. So what I like to look for in older Brazilian books, I don't want to see rust, but it sure as hell better not look like, shiny silver.
Right.
It better have some discoloration. And if it does and there's no rust, then great, because remember, once we get them out of hyper humid environments, the rust migration and the rust creation should stop for the most part if it's put in a nice bag and a pH balanced gourd. So
that's great.
Yep.
Actually,
Yep.
that leads into one of the listener questions. And maybe you guys have a personal story on this. This is from Maria Elisa, and she asked, have you ever bought a fake? Have you guys ever bought a fake? Did you learn this? In other words, did you learn this lesson the hard way, or any others like that? Ken?
Luckily, no, I haven't, but I have received the odd book here and there where a piece of the corner was originally, cut off and a new piece has been added. So not quite a fake, but some healthy restoration added there. So that's just one of those things, Yeah. You buy a rare book, hopefully it'll come to you in one piece and totally fine. Another case, you might just get a piece cut off and re-added. So it's just one of those things. You have to accept it on older books, I think.
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful, because right now the foreign market, it's heating up. It's been heating up for a few years, and I think now, like we've mentioned in previous episodes, you're seeing some of these foreign sellers now realizing, hey, I sell to the American market, I can get more than I can here, and you have to be careful, because right now it's kind of the wild, wild west still a little bit with some of the foreign stuff. So you might get into some of these guys trying to pass things off as something it really isn't, or something like that. That's rare right now. But as this heats up and the foreign comic market heats up, and it's going to do that, I believe, more and more over the next 10 years, you just be aware that might be something that accelerates a little bit initially as some of these guys try to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a story that's not personal, but that did happen that speaks to some of this. And it has to deal with a dealer that was doing a lot of business in South America. And what he was doing was he was getting foreign books out of Mexico, Central America, South America, and exchanging them for credit on his site so that they could then buy American books. Most of those books that he got were not facsimiles. Now, when we talk about facsimiles, or whatever, we're mainly talking about this culture of reprinting. It happens all over, but in South America, it's mainly out of Brazil. And he ended up with a Ohom Arana 1, which was the first, the Spidey one. And he sent it to CGC. Now, CGC, of course, doesn't know shit from Shiola about these books being reprints or counterfeits. And so they graded it as such, and it ended up with a high grade. It ended up like at a 8.5 or something. And the book was then sold to a member of the foreign community who was just getting into it and didn't know. I told him when I saw the book that it looked too good to be true, and I had him send me pictures of the staples. The staples looked brand new, and I told him, I'm sorry, dude, this book is not right. Also, one of the ways we can tell on the Brazilian books that they're reprints is the black plate appears to be thicker. All the blacks appear to be a little bit thicker. Now, what that means is in the printing process is something called dot gain. So what we think is of course, they didn't use the original plates. They had to make plates off of the books that were already current. Now, there's a way to do that where they can split it, to can split the artwork. But in that process, you end up with thicker blacks. And so you can kind of tell if you take a counterfeit book and look at it, it's got thicker blacks. Also, the counterfeits are they look like they were printed yesterday. They have that color strike that's just unreal. And I think they're a little bit glossier as well.
Yes.
So in hand, you can kind of feel the difference. So I had to tell that guy to contact the dealer and explain, hey, this is a counterfeit book. So the dealer refunded his money. He sent the book back, but I don't know where that book went. I don't know if it was cracked out. I don't know if it was resold. But yes, there are some somewhat convincing to someone that doesn't know what to look for, counterfeits out of South America.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. So the stuff you guys are saying is definitely valuable. Always beware, right?
Be wary, indeed.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you're not certain, ask. Ask.
Yeah,
Ask
there's a big
one of the
community
old
of us
guys.
here. You can always ask. It never
Yep.
hurts.
Yep.
Right on. So let's jump into some of the things we wanted to cover on this episode. Matt, you said you wanted to talk a little bit about. You called it market updates. What do you want to get into?
I just wanted to get into some of the really amazing recent sales that have happened. Speaking of the non-canons, a non-canon rag of the classic wedding issue, which is the big key of the run. This book was in pieces. The cover was gone. The back cover was gone. It was in 3 pieces, and it sold for $150. And I've personally spoken to some people that said if they had known about it, they would have gone as high as $200. That wedding issue is fucking hot.
Oh yeah.
It is blazing hot. The high sale that we know of, I think, went for a little over $2,000. That happened in November. And right now, currently, there is one listed. I believe it is Rulo Pantoja's copy, a super Mexican collector. And I believe it's Ken. I don't know if you saw the listing or if you did, Stephen, but I think it's somewhere around 1,500 is like the starting bid.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Right. Cool.
Incredible. So this all, the market is hotting up. We are getting there. It's getting to be quite expensive.
I would imagine too. You're talking about tying that back into the risk of facsimiles and counterfeits and things. I would imagine that's probably one of the first books that would happen to, right? And should that happen, the community would identify it pretty quickly, I would think.
Yeah. I think that particular book, there's enough out there already of known interest and known copies of everything with it that, a counterfeit copy of that showing up is almost instantly going to be called out by those who know, so. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Any other recent news, Matt, that you want to share, market wise?
Well, I'm wondering whether Matt's phone has died.
I think he's gone out.
Yeah. Dear listeners, we were warned by Matthew that his phone was only on 30% charge and that he may just disappear. And that appears to be what has happened. Still.
Which is fine. Actually, I can go ahead and expand a little bit. I know one other thing he was wanting to talk about that I know we have seen is the sale of the graded Amazing Spider-Man 129 that went for what edition was it again? I remember seeing it. I'm trying to recall what the edition was on it.
Yeah, I am hopeless with numbers, I must admit. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, it was I want to say it was a El Sorprendente, but I can't remember. But it was a graded 9.6 copy. And fabulous. I mean, just a fabulously beautiful looking copy. And it sold for almost $2,000. Which actually, when I saw that, I thought, that's a good price. Someone actually, I think, got that for a very good price. Because as valuable as that book is in the American market at a 9.6, I think whoever got that actually got a pretty darn good deal on that. I think as the market heats up and as the foreign market becomes more and more popularized among the American buyers, that you're going to see those big keys like that really start heating up.
Yeah. Especially, and there'd be an interesting metric. I don't know if anybody's tracking this, but follow me through here a little bit. So, if that sold for roughly $2,000 at a 9.6, just off the top of your head, Stephen, what would that be roughly in an American copy?
Oh, geez, yeah, on the spot with that one. I'm not really sure. My big brother actually owns a 9.6 American copy, triple signed by Jerry Conway, John Romita, and Stan Lee. And it's a 9.6 copy. And I know it. I hate putting out a number and then people saying, "Oh, he's totally wrong."
Well,
Because
just
I
just
don't
for the
really
sake
keep
of my
up with
point,
it.
yeah,
But I would
not
say, yeah, I would say probably in the 4,000 range.
Yeah, I was going to say
okay.
in the mid four-figure range.
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah,
Okay. So for
yeah.
let's call it 5. That seems low to
Let's
me.
call it
Um,
40, 44, 45.
okay.
I would think somewhere in that range. I could be totally off, but I believe so.
So what I was getting at there was going to be so there's a relative scale between those two, right? So let's say it's $4,000 and the Mexican version sells for $2,000, then we have a benchmark of that sells at about 50%, right?
Yeah,
I wonder if that would be a way to track the market, right? So, you know,
I
especially
think
over
probably.
time because the
I
scarcity
think
is so low.
I think, however, that the upside of the American version compared to the upside of the foreign version, you have a much bigger percentage possible potential increase on the upside of the foreign version, because as people come to realize foreigns and come to realize the rarity of the foreigns and how much harder it is to find the foreigns in that kind of grade,
Mhm.
that while the American version will probably still remain a higher value, I think the potential increase in the future, percentage wise, from where it is now to where it can be, is going to be much higher on the foreign end.
Right. You know, interesting. I'm going to just throw out a hypothesis. I would not, again, this is complete newbie, right? But imagine, again, just talking about this book, just one that happened to come up, right? So imagine however many 9.6s American versions there will be in the
Mm-hmm.
census. I don't know, right? More than one, right? And
Sure.
presumably it will get added to slightly over time, right? It's not going to like blow up, but the 9.6s on that Mexican one is not going to grow. They're even more scarce, right? So there's fewer 9.6s of that, right? So
Correct.
that population of 9.6 owners on the American book, if they're completionists and they're collectors, and they must be, otherwise they wouldn't be in this game, right? You know, there's more eyes at the North American 9.6 looking at fewer copies of the Mexican equivalent. So it's possible that value would actually exceed the American version at some point.
It would
What
not
do you think?
surprise me.
Yeah.
You've got to think of it as well. So the equivalent 9.6 issue, the American one, if a buyer had that and it went missing or he was after another copy, if he's got deep enough pockets, he could probably find another 9.6 American. But
Sure.
to find another 9.6 foreign,
yeah,
that's tough.
Extremely rare.
Yeah, so prices
in the extreme.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
it is that scarcity value again coming into the marketplace.
Yep.
Yeah. So that'd be an interesting thing just to, you know,
I mean, can you imagine it?
To be mindful of over time. Yeah, I would not be surprised by that, right? All the things that you guys are explaining, right? Especially if they live by Ken's mantra of just buy it.
Got to do it if you can. If you see it now,
yeah.
If you see it now and it's an expensive book and it's a key, then and you can just do it, then do it. Yeah. Because 5 years from now, you will not be able to afford that if things in your life stay the same.
Right, and that's why I said when I saw that this had sold for 2,000, my first thought was, wow, I think someone got a good deal on that, especially for the future, because right now, as we were saying here, it was basically 50% of the American value. I think that will change over time, maybe in the extreme, and you're going to see it approach, if not exceed, the American value because of that scarcity.
That's it. It always comes down to the four little words when you're dealing with foreign comics. Find me another one.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
Simplistic, but it's so true. You know, find me another one.
Or especially find me another one that looks like this.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
In this case.
Nice. Yeah, there are things that Matt has already learned me on, has taught me about, which is indicators that a book was returned to the publisher or whatever, right?
Hmm.
I think it was maybe a Norwegian book where the corners cut off. I think maybe it was an Italian book where they put ink across the top, right?
Distributor
So
ink, yeah.
imagine,
Yeah.
right? So imagine they were sitting all in a box vertically. Someone just went with a brush, like bloop, just down the row of them,
Yeah.
and the ink kind of ran down the top of them, right? Which I don't really, I prefer better condition, but I'd rather have the book, right? That's my general attitude. So those
Hmm.
things aren't necessarily deal breakers for me, but it adds to the authenticity in some way
Yeah.
Well,
as
it's
well.
Yeah.
it's funny because it shows the difference. Because in America, distributor ink on a book, that's how back in the day, that was how sellers helped themselves to determine when the book was supposed to go out on the shelves. And so when it comes to the grading side of the hobby, distributor ink doesn't affect grade. The only reason distributor ink in American books would affect the grade is if it was extreme to the point of, like we were saying here, running down the cover. Um, if it's all along the top, I've got books where the distributor ink is all along the top edge of the pages, and even the very, very, very top edge of the cover of the book, and the book could still get a 9.8. Now, it may not get higher than a 9.8. 9.8 would be the top end, but he could still get a 9.8. Whereas with the foreign market, and like in the case of this, in some countries, distributor ink was used to return the book,
Right.
basically to ruin the book in such a way to where it would not sell or be less sellable in order to get a return on it. In America, they would actually cut off like the title. Back in the golden age, they would literally cut off the top like third quarter or third section of the cover
I have seen a
where
few of those.
the
Yeah.
title was. So whenever you see these old books and the American books where the top part of the cover is completely, it looks like someone just took a scissor and went, just cut it straight off. Those were return copies, or they were meant to be return copies. What they would do is they would take the little piece that they cut and return it. They would ship it, send it back to the manufacturer, and they would get a refund.
Yeah. As proof of non-sale. Yeah.
Proof of non-sale without having to send back the entire book. Because if you had a big old stack of books, the shipping would be ridiculous. So they would just cut off the top part of the title to prove that, the book was unsaleable, and they would get a refund.
God,
Yeah.
that hurts my soul.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it just?
It does,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So actually, that's probably a good jumping on point to what I think you wanted to talk a little bit about, Stephen, or maybe I conjured that on my own. What I wanted to ask you about, at least, best options for foreign grading. Before Matt left us, he did throw out some shade about CGC grading, that one copy you mentioned, right? So, what in your expertise in full disclosure, you do this professionally, right?
I do. I have dealt with both grading companies for like 15 years,
Okay.
over 15 years. I will say that when it comes to just your everyday normal comics, both companies are fine. They both grade. They're both generally speaking. It's like Coke and Pepsi. Just choose the one you're more comfortable with, the people you like to deal with the most, and have at it. If you're collecting and you're happy with the way you're collecting, don't sweat it. You're collecting the way you want if you're happy doing it. But I will say that when it comes to the foreign comic side of the comic industry, I have to say I've seen and dealt with both companies, the big ones as far as CGC and CBCS. And full disclosure here, I am a approved facilitator for CBCS. I am one of the people that run booths for them, work at shows with them, get signature facilitation for people through them. I'm very heavy with CBCS. So take that with a grain of salt with what I say here, but I can say through experience and seeing both what I've done and what many other people have done, CBCS is far and away, as far as I'm concerned, the better option in getting your foreign books graded. Mainly because with guys there like Tim Bildhauser, who, yes, we've mentioned before here, and I've mentioned very times, I'm very good friends with Tim. I know we keep throwing his name out there, but for those of you who don't know, Tim is the foreign comics guy at CBCS. He has been a grader for them. He knows how to grade. And when it comes to foreign books, he either knows exactly what he's looking at, or he knows who to talk to get the information about exactly what he's looking at.
Right.
And what the benefit on that is when it comes to the labeling, your labeling is going to be not only correct for the foreign book that you're submitting, you're going to get more information on the label about what the book is and what is in it with CBCS than you typically will with CGC. And I have seen CGC make big mistakes.
When you say that, what's in it, that gets back to that point of what's on the cover versus
what's on the cover versus what is inside. Because what CBCS will do and what Tim will make sure when he's doing up labels for these books, they send him images of the inner pages. And he looks through those images and he says, okay, and he does the research. He says, this story is from this book. This story is from that book. The cover, however, is the cover from this book, which may be a totally different book. So what he'll do is he'll say, okay, here's the label will say it's this book. Also CBCS will put as the title of the book, they'll do it in the language. They won't say it's Amazing Spider-Man 129 German edition. They'll say it's Die Spinne. It'll say Die Spinne instead of Amazing Spider-Man. So you'll get the foreign language as the title for what the title is. And then it'll even say, if it's relevant, it will say cover of Amazing Spider-Man, whatever, and then if you turn it around on the back, typically on the back, you'll see a little notation that will say, prints, this book, number this, stories from this story from this book, this story from this book in German in black and white, or something like that. It'll have all the information on the back there that will tell you what is in the book, what language it's in, whether it's color or if it's in black and white. It will tell you everything you need to know about the interior of that book. CGC typically does not do that. They'll just say, oh, it's this book, it's the German edition, there you go.
Yeah, end of. Yeah.
And often not even get that right. I've seen mistakes where they don't even get the country right, so it's terrible.
And that's probably not through any ill intention. Is probably just
no, it's not. It's just they don't know.
Exactly.
They don't know.
Right.
I'm just going to bolster what Steve's just said there. Actually, there's a lovely collector in the foreign comic community. I'll name him. He's a great guy, great friend, Hector Banda. Hi, Hector, if you're listening to this.
Hey, Hector.
Yeah, Hector Banda. Now, Hector is a big Spider-Man fan. He decided at one point to grade all of ASM 298 worldwide, get them all done. So he graded them at CGC. And me and Hector, fair few years down the road, came to a deal. I had something he wanted, and I quite fancied what he had with those 298s. So Hector, lovely guy, sends them to me gratis. Shipping, he paid for the lot. I'm looking at, great. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12, 13 books that comprise the complete ASM 298 run worldwide. Wow. And out of those 13, all done by CGC, all signatured, by the way. Each book has about 3 signatures from Stan Lee, Todd McFarlane.
Nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful books. Except out of all those books, only about 5 countries are right.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just another example, that shows that, I mean,
exactly.
Like you say, it's not anything where CGC is trying to screw you over.
No, it's not malicious or anything. Yeah,
it's not malicious in any way. They just don't know.
Yeah.
Right. They don't have anyone there who's a real expert on any of this. They might do some casual research, and then they see the first thing they see and say, oh, that must be what it is. And they just throw it out there without really doing intense research, or talking to the right people to find out, is that really what this is,
Right. Aside from just misidentifying those things or not being as comprehensive, is there any like the standards for grading foreign books versus domestic books? Are there any differences? We talked a lot about staples earlier, right? That's one of the powerful things about grading is that it's uniform. It doesn't matter if it's the same standards are to a 2019 book to a 1950 book, right? Is that true is that true also of domestic to versus foreign? Same standards.
Yeah. I believe like especially with CBCS, they're going to grade the book for what the grade is. I mean, you may take into account a little bit about the fact of where it came from, but the fact is, if the staples are rusted, the staples are rusted. You know, you could sit there and say, well, they're rusted because, well, yeah, but that doesn't change the fact that they're rusted. So the fact that they're rusted, there's a standard by which we do the grading on that. So the grade's going to be affected by that on this, just as the same as it would be if it was on an American copy. However, on the buyer side of everything, on the collector side of everything, you can take that as understanding this is a foreign book. This comes from the Filipinos or wherever it may be, where the climate is not going to be very conducive to the longevity of the quality of this book. So yes, the book might have a lower grade, and that lower grade may be because it has some rusted staples, but that tells you two things. One, as already spoken of on here, it tells you the book is probably the real deal. It's probably the real deal. There's not going to be any sort of counterfeit or facsimile going on with it. It's probably the real deal. And two, it just tells you that it not only is it the real deal, but you know, the grade, most copies are probably going to have this. You know, most copies are going to have this issue going on to some degree or another. And the higher the grade you can get out of something like that, the more rare it becomes, even in the middle grades.
Yeah.
You know, so if you get a book that's a 6 or a 5.5 or a 6.5, in American market, they're going to look at that and be like, that's just a mid-grade copy. It's nothing that no big deal.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but this is a Filipino copy. A 6.5 Filipino copy is a whole nother matter, because you're not going to find anything hardly that exceeds that.
Right.
You know, in America, 9.8 might be considered the gold standard, the high top grade. You know, in Filipinos, it might be a whole different thing. In the Colombian, it might be a whole different thing. You know, you might, if you're getting into the 7s or 7.5s, you're probably getting up there towards a gold standard. You know,
Sure.
as far as grade is concerned.
Yeah. How about restoration on foreign books? Is there any additional challenges in detecting it because the book is slightly more something a grader might be less familiar with?
I believe that guys like Tim and other guys who grade at the guys who are at CBCS are very, very good at restoration detection. And kind of like what was being mentioned here, they also know the difference between restoration and conservation. And they're two different things. And we can get into that at another time. But yeah, they're going to be able to detect if color touch has been done, you know, if any sort of a piece replacement has been done, you know, like you mentioned before, snips being cut off of corners and then replaced later on. They're going to catch that kind of stuff. And it is going to cause a book to get a restored grade. Again, though, I will say that while restored grades are not preferred, obviously, over original, with foreign books, while that is still the case, it may not be as much of a deterrent.
Right.
As with American books, because again, these foreign versions can be much harder to find even fine copies of. So yes, this may have had a small amount of restoration done on it, but dadgummit, you've got a nice copy of this book regardless.
Right.
You know, and that's what matters more than whether a little bit of restoration might have been done on it. Because finding another copy and anything approaching that grade would be nearly impossible.
True. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to Ken's mantra.
Yeah. You got it. You've got
it.
Yeah.
You see it, you want it, you buy it.
Yeah, and find me another one.
And find me another one down the line. If I happen to find a better one down the line, great. I can see it, want it, and buy it then, and then do something with my other copies.
There you go.
But I cannot assume that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Then you assume you'll see that book appear again, especially if it's a key. You know.
Oh yeah, especially that.
Yeah. So the other things I know we wanted to talk about, Ken, you wanted to talk about your Gurries, but I wondered, do we want to do that with Matt? Because he probably has some history to add.
Well, that would be fun. Yeah, do it with Matt as well. No problem. I can hold off until then. Not a problem at all.
Okay, so we'll just tease it for now then.
Okay.
Stay tuned for that. That's gonna
coming
awesome.
Soon in a future.
Coming
soon. Right? It's not gonna be scintillating. It's gonna be some other
it's gonna be some other adjective.
Right.
It'll be what does Oguri Mensal mean in English? Because it took me a long time to find out what it means. Strangely enough, but I would say I will keep that for a while.
Cool.
Okay.
let me throw out a fun question. This might be a silly question, or it might be like it's probably one of those things that everyone is in this subculture has dealt with privately. I could just be making that up, but how do you store your books? And I don't mean this in terms of like bags and boards and that kind of stuff. I mean like, I collect Fantastic Four number 52, right? And I have it across all these countries. But I also have a Fantastic Four US run. So do I take my 52 out of my US run and put it with my other Fantastic Four 52s from all the other countries? Or do I keep my books grouped by country? How do you keep them sorted by set, by runs? How do you sort your books? Weird question.
Well, I tend to, I'm basically like a run collector. I don't focus on keys, and I don't try and build that many sets. But if I see, I find out what country publishes what in terms of Captain America, how many books they have. So they have like, start at issue 1, obviously, and finish at issue 120. Then I will try and attain all 120 issues. So for me, it doesn't make sense taking books from many countries just for that one issue and just putting them in a pile. It doesn't work for me. I have basically, that run of 1-121 from Brazil, let's say, in one section of my room.
Right.
Okay. I don't even do it in alphabetical order. So I've got a Brazil run right next to a German run. So yeah, that's kind of how I do it.
Cool. Oh, that's easy because you don't collect sets.
Yeah.
This is maybe a question for sets. Like like when Matt was talking about his Star Wars set, right? Like, you keep all those together, but he also collects other books from other countries, right? So does he have, like you described, does he have a Brazilian box and a German box, or whatever, a Williams box and a Hit box, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like a personal. It's a silly question. I know it is.
No, it's a good one.
It's actually really, because how you store them or how you keep them together is, especially when you're dealing with the foreign books, can be just as personal to the collector as how they collect in the first place.
I mean, for me at the moment, it's working wonders the way I collect things, because every week I take 10 books from a particular run from, right from the start. I go right the way through to the end of the run. And I do it over however many weeks it takes to show off 10 books per episode. So that works awesome. Great. It works a treat, must admit.
Yeah. I pretty much just keep all my foreign stuff together as foreign stuff. However, in a few cases, I'll actually go ahead and take them out and put them with other things, especially as I get them signed and graded and kind of finalized in my mind. Is like, this book is now done. I'm not going to do anything else with this book other than just own it. Because I'll have them segmented where these are books that I'm going to just get graded at some point. These are books that I'm going to get signatures on at some point and then get graded. And then I have the ones where I'm done. I'm done with these. They've been done. They've been signed. They've been graded, whatever. And at that point, I may take them out of the foreign and put them with whatever they sort of apply to. Like, for example, one of the things I personally like to collect are Marvel 25th Anniversary border covers.
Yes.
In America, that was in November of 1986. In November of 1986, they did all these Marvel 25th Anniversary border covers with the characters around the border, and then the art of whatever it was in the center, usually a character, sort of a headshot. And I love those. I'm looking for the direct American copies. I'm looking for the newsstand American copies. I'm looking for the Canadian price variants. I'm looking for any foreign, and then any foreigns I can possibly find. And I have found some. And some of them I've gotten signed and graded. And when I have, I've put them in with all of the other signed and graded or just graded, Marvel 25th copies I have, whether they're foreign or not. They're all in one place, So, I have a specific way I might do it to start with, and then I might change that with certain books depending on what I'm doing. So
that's cool. Yeah, I like what you said. That's kind of, it's a bit of a reflection on how you collect personally.
Yeah,
I like the way you said that.
Because some people like to collect just certain covers. Some people like to collect just a certain character. Some people like to collect a particular key story. There's all kinds of different ways to collect. So how you store them or keep them with each other can also be just as particular to you as individually as a collector.
There's also that other golden mantra, isn't there, Stephen, where there's no right or wrong way to collect.
No, there is no wrong way to collect. If you are collecting in the way that makes you happy with what you have, you cannot go wrong.
Yeah. And that's the fun of it. And,
It is.
probably resorting them and stuff like that is probably half the fun of it too. Like, to be completely honest, sitting there going through your box and, I'm going to pull these out and put them over here. And then like 6 months later, you reversed it, right? I'm going to take them from here and put them back over there. Like, that's the fun of it, right? So,
yeah.
Love it. Yeah, kind of a silly question, but a fun one. I think we all deal with, but cool. Well, let's put a pin in the Gurries, and we'll do that with Matt on board next time.
Yeah, because he's going to say things that I've forgotten about, I am sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, he seems to have a really great knowledge of like the companies and production and the process and things. So I wouldn't want to do it without him.
No,
not that
agree.
Not that you're insufficient.
No, I totally understand. No, I'd love Matt to be here as well, for sure.
Yep.
Right on. Yeah. Cool. So let's close out then. This is the question that I want to throw out as kind of the cliffhanger, and we'll give it to Matt before the next episode too. What's the biggest unknown tip for finding something? Right. So we talked about sourcing, and we talked about directories of sourcing that and Scott Robinson provided, and we gave tips on that, but or newbie mistakes, we should say. But what's the biggest tip? Like, what's the that one little idiosyncratic thing that you did, where you lucked out through these series of choices you made to find a super rare book, unknown tip that people might get some value out of. So
very good.
Let's think about that for the next one. And who's not going to want to rejoin us to learn that? Come on.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a cliffhanger right there.
That's a cliffhanger.
Cool. So just let's close out with just some plugs and stuff. So Ken, your website is kenworthing.com. You mentioned your videos that you do. What's the most recent one that you posted, or what's coming up?
Oh, it's one I posted yesterday. It's on YouTube. I use that obviously for the main channel for videos because it's the biggest platform out there for videos, I feel. So it's all on my YouTube channel, which is the wondrously named Ken's Comic Book Channel.
Awesome.
Isn't it just?
That's a fancy schmancy name right there, buddy.
It took me literally seconds to think of that one.
Oh, and it's right.
That's right.
But at the moment, I'm halfway through, actually 3/4 of the way through, doing all the fantastic run of books, which published by Oddams in the UK in the late 60s.
Those are cool.
Oh, they are great. So I'm getting through them.
The biggest question I'm going to ask you at some point, I should probably just start asking you now, is how do I get into your will, Ken?
You're already in there. Don't worry. You're there.
Just didn't know it yet.
Yeah.
You're a little PS at the bottom. Please give Eric and joint custody of all my books.
Nice.
Poor Matt. For the the worst occasion for his phone to die off.
Well, he lost out.
Yeah.
So we should mention as well, Matt's handle is Define999, right? So go look him up there. Yeah, I remember correctly. And Stephen, yours is The Grading Room, right?
The Grading Room. Actually, though, I also do my signature facilitation services through TGR Comics. That's The Grading Room, TGR Comics. So if you want to go on Facebook or whatever, right now it's kind of the slow season for cons. I'm not really doing anything right now at the moment. I typically start picking it up in late February, March, and then on through the year. But I am happy to help anybody in getting your books signed and done through CBCS if you like. Please feel free to hit me up on TGR Comics, either on Instagram or on Facebook, and say, hey, I saw so-and-so is going to be at this show you're going to be at. I'll make sure I post on there what shows I'm going to be going to. I don't have any scheduled right now, but that'll start up in like February, March. So, hey, I've got this foreign book. I want to get it signed. I'll be happy to help you out. I do it myself, so whether it's American books, foreign books, it doesn't matter. If it can be signed and done, I'm happy to help you out.
Very cool. That's very kind of you to do that.
Yeah.
And just in general, plugs for the podcast. So you can find us on Facebook at FCC Podcast, right? Mm-hmm. You can find us in the Foreign Comics Collector magazine group. We post them there individually and as a page all the time. You could find our previous episodes on iTunes, on Breaker, on Anchor, pretty much wherever you can find podcasts of all sorts. And if you do find us, please leave a rating or review. Please subscribe, right?
Yes, please.
You know, we just hit 100 likes on Facebook, so it's all uphill
Woohoo!
from here. It's awesome, right? So it's cool. Yeah.
The only way is up, boys. The only way is
That's
up.
right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm loving this, guys. So yeah, thanks again for including me. Thanks for entertaining my silly questions and whatnot. I think this is a blast. Looking forward to doing more.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to keep on going until we stop, which will be when I'm probably around about 99 and a half. So.
Cool. Do you want to give us a nice closing in your authoritative British
My
accent?
authoritative British accent. Okay, well, everybody, thank you for listening to us. We really do appreciate. I might even start that again. Thanks for listening, everybody. We really do appreciate it. This podcast is something that I personally want to do a lot for a long time, and I have 3 great co-hosts who co-hosted with me. So, hey, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening, everyone.
Here, here. And happy holidays and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Crimbo.